Hey everybody, and welcome back to Smith Party of Six. Today I've got all the kiddos here with me. We finished up this year of homeschooling right at the end of April, so we thought it would be fun to pop on today and talk about our favorite books that we read this year and some of their least favorite books that we read this year, and just kind of give you guys an idea of ones that are fun to read. All right, so first up, we're gonna do Aspen. This past year, he was doing a lot of pre-K work and some kindergarten work. We're gonna be continuing his kindergarten stuff and possibly going into some of the first grade stuff in this coming year. So we read lots of stories and stuff like that with him. We would read from like a children's classics book that we have, or just any picture books that he found super interesting. But for his most favorite and least favorite, he actually chose 2 poems. So we would read out of this children's book of verse. It's just a collection of all kinds of different poems from different authors. A lot of really, really good ones in here. So Aspen, what was your favorite poem out of this book?
Mr. Nobody.
Mr. Nobody. There for a while, he would make me read Mr. Nobody every time we were doing poetry. So I would read Mr. Nobody to start with, and then we would read whatever one we were supposed to be on for the day. Did you want to show it to them?
Uh-huh.
So what's Mr. Nobody about?
So,
Can you talk to the camera?
So he is quiet as a mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And no one can see his face. And those are his boots.
Yeah, so the concept of Mr. Nobody is basically that he does all the things around the house that the kids and other people in the family say that they didn't do it. It was nobody, so it's Mr. Nobody. So he's getting all the blame for all the things that they do. So that was a really cute poem. It has just an anonymous author, so you know I can't tell you anything as far as what poet to go and find, but it was a lot of fun for him. So which one was your least favorite poem?
My poor dog Trey.
Yeah, okay. So there's one, and it was actually our most recent one that we read, called My Dog Trey, and he's saying my poor dog Trey because he says that over and over again in it. And it's about this man with a dog, and unfortunately by the end the dog has passed away. So it's really sad. It is by Thomas Campbell, and I think it was his least favorite just because it evoked so much emotion from him, and it was a negative one, right? But I will say that this kind of opens up a talking point, which is that a lot of times we tend to kind of shy away from sad things when it comes to children's literature and even poetry. But honestly, here in this family, we don't really do that. You'll actually hear from some of our other kids about certain sad things that maybe evoked a lot of emotion from them, and sometimes that's their favorite thing. It's relatable and it's real, and we don't have to kind of dumb things down. People do that a lot sometimes. We don't have to dumb things down for kids. And I can understand from the perspective of wanting to protect innocence and keeping things light. I get that. But we don't always have to approach things that way. They can handle big emotions. Sometimes it's just hard, huh? It's sad when it's talking about a doggy dying. Yeah. All right, so next up is going to be Arwen. She's bringing the dance party today. Okay, so our family uses Ambleside Online as our curriculum, and Arwen was doing year 1 this year. So while Aspen's stuff...
I'm in first grade.
Yeah, so while Aspen's stuff was year 0, you know, it was all the pre-K and kindergarten type stuff. Hers, she did year 1. It was so much fun. I loved Ambleside's curriculum. We read so many good things. All right, but Arwen, what was your favorite thing that we read?
Paddle to the Sea.
Paddle to the Sea.
I let my book.
Okay. So there is Paddle to the Sea. It's by C. Halling. And we read several of his books throughout the years with Ambleside. So I got to read some of his stuff with all 3 of the older kids. And it was just a really good book. What were some of the things about Paddle to the Sea that made it your favorite book?
Well, he traveled a lot of places, and I've known him for a very long time. So to break up with the book, it was very sad.
Yeah, we kept calling him her book friend. You know, we make all kinds of book friends throughout the year. And even though it looks like it's a thin book, but we only read like 1 or 2 chapters a week. So that's like, you know, a page or 2 per week. So it spreads out over the entire course of the year. So there were some tears shed at the end when we were saying goodbye to Paddle.
Let me see. Oh, and there's a map at the end.
Yeah.
Of where Paddle went.
So it was really fun because he started up above where Lake Superior is, and then we got to travel with him all the way through the Great Lakes
and out. Sea.
Yeah, and out to the ocean.
I've known him for about 1 year and a half.
Yeah, about a year for you. For him, it was like 3 years. We got to hear about 3 years of Paddle's life. So, you know, it feels like you really get to know a book. So we were both sad by the end, but so again, this is one that brings in a lot of emotion for your kids. They might feel really, really attached to the character, but that can be a good thing too, right? And I told her that she can revisit Paddle anytime that she wants. He'll be on our shelf. Okay, so Paddle was your favorite. Yeah. What was your least favorite book from this?
Our Island Story.
Our Island Story. So this is one of their history books, and it's one, again, that lasts with you for years. So she started out in the ancient time period, and then Lexi was in the medieval stuff. Elijah was in the Reformation. And he still has, I think, another year of Our Island Story. So it's one that sticks with you for a while. But history is not Arwen's absolute favorite subject. She likes some parts of history.
Yeah, I like Boadicea, and I like Alfred the Great.
Yeah, those were fun to learn about. So what are some of the things that made this one your least favorite?
You would think that I would like it because I like learning about our world and how it was before. But it just is kind of boring, and I only like the interesting chapters of the book, and the ones that are interesting are fun and not boring, but a lot of them are not really interesting, so I don't like them.
Which is fair. Not everybody is going to be interested in every single book. I will say she will probably still have to read it for a couple more years. But so now after I have experienced the book for a year, I know that there are different ways that I could improve and maybe help it to come alive a little bit more. We did some map stuff, but I could probably do more of it. So there are different ways definitely that I could make it come to life. Different kings and queens, maybe print out more pictures and stuff like that. But yeah, she's still gonna have to read it for at least a couple more years.
Mommy, can we do what we did in that one book where we print the books for Shakespeare? We print out characters for it, and then I color them.
Yeah.
And then I get to point them when you say the character's name.
Yeah. So for Tales from Shakespeare, I printed out. I just found pictures online. Yeah, different pictures that she could just kind of color in that went with each character. You know, we read Midsummer Night's Dream, for example, and so I printed out different fairy ones, and I had one for Bottom and all of that. So then she's asking basically if I can do that same thing for Our Island Story.
Yeah.
So
it's really fun. It makes it more fun than just having to read it by itself.
Which makes sense. So maybe I could print out some of the kings and queens and other people that we learn about in England's history, and she could color those in and have that in her binder to kind of remind her who we're talking about.
And that will make it more fun so that I don't have to be.
Sure, that's fine.
I do ballet.
She's been doing it for a few years now.
Yeah.
They just finished up too. She just had her year-end recital. So.
On the 16th of May.
Yep. All right, so that is a wrap for Arwen's stuff. Next up is Alexia.
Bye.
Okay, actually, just kidding. I also forgot to do her little shout out. Each of the kids kind of picked something that they enjoyed as like a free read that wasn't part of the curriculum, but was just something that they read on the side for fun. So one of Arwen's favorites was Charlotte's Web. She really enjoyed that one. And it's been her first like bigger chapter book that she read all by herself.
It was really fun.
Yes.
But at the end, it's really sad because Charlotte dies.
Spoiler alert. All right, so we've got Lex, and she completed year 2 of Ambleside. So it's pretty like advanced, and this was our first year of doing Ambleside. So even though she's a 3rd grader, she was doing year 2 of all of the readings for Ambleside, just to kind of like ease us in a little bit. Because, yeah, so we did like the Good and Beautiful and stuff like that before, which is nice. It has nice things, but Ambleside is definitely a step up when it comes to the readings. And I also just thought it would be easier for history's sake to kind of have them all one right after the other. It kind of also helped me to understand the flow of history a little bit better, which was nice. Okay, so Alexia, for year 2, what was your favorite thing that we read?
Okay, so I have 2 favorites, but out of all of them, Understood Betsy.
Understood Betsy. This one was honestly one of my favorites too. Such a good book.
A lot of feelings.
Arwen's wanting to say also because she listened in.
It's one of my favorites too.
So she was listening while we would do all of the readings. So she's gonna get to read it again this year, knowing that she already loves it. It was just so good.
And at the end, it's really sad. It made me cry. It's not really sad. It's happy feelings, but it made me cry.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion, like we talked about before, that goes into it. But you really connect with the character because there's so much emotion.
Aunt Frances is sassy, though.
Aunt Frances is an interesting character.
And she's so skinny. Because she doesn't eat. She starves herself. She has 1 meal a day.
Different folks, different strokes. Okay, so this is a spoiler alert. So if you don't want to hear anything about the book, fast forward just a little bit. Okay, what spoiler do you want to give?
So she has an Aunt Frances too. I mean Aunt Harriet too, and she gets really sick, so she has to go to someone else's house. Abigail and Uncle Henry. Aunt Abigail and Uncle Henry.
Yeah, which she's really nervous about, but it ends up just being the best possible thing for her. You really watch her grow throughout the book.
Aunt Frances gets married to a weird guy, so...
But Aunt Frances loves him. He's not weird for Aunt Frances. Arwen has another spoiler that she wanted to tell you.
Yes. So the last chapter is called Understood Aunt Frances.
Yeah, instead of Understood Betsy, the whole book is about Elizabeth Ann or Betsy, but then that last chapter is Understood Aunt Frances. You kind of get Aunt Frances by the end. She has a lot of growth throughout the story, like I mentioned before, and there's lots of little stories like that as she, you really see her evolve as a person. So it's one that you connect to. I was actually really surprised in a Facebook group that I'm in, like for the Ambleside online curriculum, there were a couple of families talking about how like they didn't really like it, they felt bored, and I was like, man, are you guys reading the same book? So it might not be for everybody, but we really enjoyed it. All right, before they tell you the entire book, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So you had 2 favorites, so what was your second favorite?
Shakespeare.
Tales from Shakespeare.
Probably my favorite one out of the Shakespeare one is Romeo and Juliet.
I love that story.
Oh, also, what's the other one called, Mommy, that we did before? Those 2 robbers.
The one with the 2 robbers. Are you talking about 2 gentlemen from Verona? Is that what you're talking about? And he joins a company of robbers at one point.
I like 2 gentlemen of Verona too. And let's see, what else do I like?
You guys also read The Taming of the Shrew with Catherine.
Oh, I loved that one. Catherine, and I don't remember his name.
So with Tales from Shakespeare, it's not the actual Shakespeare play, but it takes all the main plot points, written really well, like very rich type of literature, lots of big words, so you might have to kind of plow through slowly at first until they kind of learn the flow of it and the way that the speech is. It's just a lot different, but it's super good. Also, a positive thing about it, it takes out all of the parts of Shakespeare's plays that might be a little bit risque for kids. It doesn't have anything like that in there. So like when she says that her favorite is Romeo and Juliet, know that not everything from Romeo and Juliet is actually in the one from Tales from Shakespeare. So they're all kid friendly. They might have some topics in there that you might feel uncomfortable with, some violence, stuff like that. So, you know, you might want to pre-read stuff, but it was really good, and we had a fun time reading through it together.
I also liked All's Well That Ends Well.
Oh yes, yeah, I forgot that we read that one
What's
too.
the other one with the clock again? Who wanted to switch with the other one?
That was from Parables from Nature, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I like that.
Yeah. That was a really good book too. That one's gonna be one of my favorites, actually. So next up, her least favorite book that we used this year.
We don't have a book of it. We read it on the computer.
Yeah. So I will pop up a little thing for you right here so you can see. Her least favorite was Thornton Burgess's animal book. Why was it your least favorite? We used it for natural history, so science.
The chapters were too long, and I did written narrations, so I didn't like it.
Yeah, so it was the one that I had her do written narrations for this year, which are just part of life. So certain things that we don't like, we do kind of have to just push through. The chapters could be fairly long, and you're getting pelted with a lot of facts. Even though it's in the context of a story, there is kind of a lot to remember. So for her, by the end, it was frustrating, even though we would split it up. Like, I wouldn't have her read an entire chapter in a day. Sometimes we even split it up into 4 days or so. Just from a mom's perspective, Burgess Animal is good as like an introduction to a lot of different animals that you might see around you if you live in the United States, probably even in Canada too. So it's a really good introduction for talking about these different animals, what makes them different from one another, their habits, maybe even noticing and observing these types of things about animals while you're out in nature. But it can become a lot. I tried not to have her get bogged down in the detail of like, okay, in this written narration, I want you to write down Peter Rabbit said this and Mother Nature said this and all of that. Instead, I kind of distilled it down, and for the written narration, I said, okay, so we're gonna write the name of this animal on the top line. Above it, we're gonna leave a space for you to draw a picture of that animal. And then down underneath of the animal's name, you can write some of the things that you remember about that animal, like some of its habits, where it goes, how it builds a house, how many babies it usually has, what it likes to eat, any special information about it. So that's kind of how I did those written narrations, because at first when she was narrating, I was just having her do it like everything else, where, you know, if it's telling a story, then you're telling the story back. I didn't really feel like that worked out super well with that one, and it also kind of defeated the purpose. Like, she was trying to remember who said what instead of actually focusing on like the characteristics of each specific animal. So that's just a little tidbit thrown out there for you. If you ever find yourself as a Charlotte Mason homeschooler using Burgess Animal and you want to know, okay, what's best for narration, that's just kind of what worked out for us.
It's boring.
She didn't like it. I understand. Honestly, it wasn't my favorite either. So she also remembered that she has another favorite. So what? All kinds of faces, so extra. Okay, what was your other favorite? Sit back so they can actually see your face, Lexi. There we go.
Richard, Duke of Normandy.
Yeah, so we read The Little Duke, about Richard, Duke of Normandy. His story was super compelling. In the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a tough start, but then as it continues on, the pace of the story kind of picks up. It's super interesting. You fall in love with the characters. So what are some of your favorite things about the book?
I don't know.
It was just enjoyable.
Yeah. And spoiler alert.
Okay, try not to tell them the whole story.
Okay.
Okay.
He meets two brothers, Lothar and who else?
And Carloman.
Carlin. He becomes friends with Carloman, but then Lothar, he's rude.
Yes.
And then they kind of become friends at the end. But Lothar gets sick, but Carloman dies. Because he gets so sick that he dies because he's not used to Normandy. So, and he wants to go, and they're Princess of France.
Yes, King Louis's sons.
Yeah. And then their mom, Margaret, is
that her name, Margaret?
I think.
Probably, you're probably right. I'm having a hard time remembering her name.
Oh,
I didn't like her, so I was blocking her out, I think. So there are lots of character type things to discuss throughout the book. honestly almost every book that you would read that's on Ambleside's reading list, you're gonna have a lot of things to talk about as far as character goes, and you know, bravery versus cowardice, being gentle versus unkind bull in a china shop type of personality. There's all kinds of personalities, like conversations that come up about those personalities and stuff. She has 2 more favorites where we won't talk about everything with those books, but we can give them a quick shout out.
Okay, so Tree in the Trail.
Tree in the Trail, so that was another Sea Hauling book, like Arwen's Paddle to the Sea favorite.
And Seabird. Can I show them?
And Seabird, so that was the other Sea Hauling book for her this year. I forgot they were right behind us. They got moved to Arwen's cubby already to prepare for next year.
Tree in the Trail.
So that one, you're following a tree. The whole time. This is the other Sea Hauling one, Seabird.
Goes through the timeline.
Yeah, and it's really cool. You kind of follow this family through their generations with this certain seabird. So anyways, little intro.
At Tree in the Trail, there's a little map. And then at the end of that, there's a little timeline.
Yeah, this one has a timeline at the end.
Of
their family and the
goes
ships.
from bottom to top.
All right. Her last shout out though is one of her favorite free reads.
The Bobbsey Twins. So Mystery at Snow Lodge.
Yes. So she is enjoying Bobbsey Twins stuff now, which they're really, really old books, and there's like a ton of them that you can get. So we basically found it where there were used books. We like to go thrift and used type shopping all the time, especially since we're getting so many books. We buy them used. All right, that is the end of Lexi's books for this year. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Oh, one more thing. I'm gonna do jazz.
So she's gonna be doing dance next year too. She wanted to let you know.
Or jazz. Woo, 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 woo.
All right.
Whoosh. Ow.
All right. Last but not least, my biggest goober here, Elijah.
Hello.
So he was in 4th grade this last year and doing year 3 of Ambleside. And again, it was another enjoyable year. I don't know that there are any Ambleside years that aren't enjoyable. I guess we'll find out as we continue on with this. So Elijah, what was your favorite book from this year?
This Country of Ours.
Yes. So This Country of Ours, we don't have a physical copy of it. We read it on our Kindle. We will be getting a physical copy of it for this coming year. I, try to get as many hard copies as what I can.
Oh yeah, I forgot you didn't get it because you ordered it and then they sent you the wrong book.
Yeah, they sent me the wrong book. But anyways, it is one of our history books, and it focuses on the history of America. So starting with the explorers like Columbus and moving up, what happened with forming the colonies and all of that, and even continuing on from there, because he's not done with it yet. So this was just his first year in This Country of Ours. So what were some of your favorite aspects of it?
I really liked seeing how the French were acting like I don't know how to word it, in America and I liked hearing about what it was like before, of course, all of this, and seeing a perspective of people who didn't win the fight for America.
Yeah. For example, in our island story, a lot of times since we're focusing on the history of England, we're in a lot of cases focusing on all of their wins. So it was kind of a nice break for him to hear about the other side of people, who didn't win and their perspective on things, which I thought was cool of him to want to know all sides of things and not just the side of the winner.
In my least
Hold on, I thought you said you had 2 favorites though. You also wanted to talk about Princess and the Goblin, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then his other one we do have a hard copy of, and it was actually C.S. Lewis's favorite book as a child. So if you want to go ahead and show it and talk about it, this was one of his literature books.
The illustration on the outside doesn't look the greatest. The illustration on the inside is a lot better.
Okay, so what's the name of the book?
Princess and the Goblin.
Okay, so what did you like about The Princess and the Goblin?
Well, it was about, of course, a princess, and she wasn't allowed to go outside, and she never knew why. And then one day she was exploring her big, huge sort of mansion thing, and she found an old lady, and the old lady made her something to where she could go out at night, and she found out why they weren't able to, because there were monsters outside, and she made friends outside of her house, and she became less bratty from how she started off and spoiled.
Very cool. They like stories a lot that have growth. So you might start out not enjoying a character very much, but then you get to watch their character develop over time, and how they grow and become basically a better person. Okay, so that was a good choice. Now, what was your least favorite? I was actually really proud of him for what he chose as his least favorite. So what is it?
Do we have the book?
Yeah, I have it right here.
A Child's History of the World.
Okay. Why was it your least favorite?
It's very less detailed, and a chapter can be like 20 years
Yeah.
in it.
So
And it skips through a lot too quickly.
yeah.
It makes
So
it boring.
this one definitely, I was honestly kind of surprised as I started to read through it that this was even included in Ambleside's curriculum. I mean, they obviously know what they're doing. They've been doing it for quite a long time. But it was probably one of my least favorites too, honestly. And it kind of feels more like a textbook, which obviously with a lot of Charlotte Mason stuff, you're not gonna have things that feel like a textbook. I will say it's slightly better than like, you know, a textbook would be in public school or something. But whereas he liked to really get immersed into the lives of the people he was reading about in this country of ours, you don't have that really in Child's History of the World. It kind of just skates over everything, just kind of giving you a bigger overview. Sometimes it was nice, for example, you know, we had chapters and chapters on Queen Elizabeth in Our Island Story, and then after we had been done with it for a little while, we read a chapter on her in here. So it was kind of like a nice review to bring her up into our minds again and refresh, but you definitely don't get as in-depth as you would with Island Story or This Country of Ours. It's just very broad, basic, and so he didn't really like that. And I can stand behind that and saying it's better when you feel more like you know the people involved in history. All right, last but not least, for the kids stuff anyways, and then I'll talk here for a minute. We have his shout out.
My favorite series of books. I'm just gonna show the first book, but it's by Andrew Peterson, and it's Wing Feather.
Yeah, they're really good books.
Spoiler alert. In the second book, Lily's dog Nugget dies.
Yeah, it's a really big spoiler alert if you've read any of the books or seen the TV show, because they have a whole show of it now, which is really cool. The kids have enjoyed that. They even started showing it at our church on Saturdays, like for families to come and watch.
And it was all because of me.
It all originally started with him because he passed it on to his friends that he liked the book, and they were like, let's all start watching the TV show together. And then they were like, let's show everybody at church this TV show.
And then the church.
So yeah, we really like Wing Feather. We've started it as a family read aloud. We've kind of dropped the ball a little bit since school has been out, but we're going to continue it.
Which makes me upset because I want all of them to hear the book.
Yes. So right now there's 4 books, and then there's also like the Creaturepedia out right now that like talks about all the different creatures that you come across in the Wing Feather saga. So yeah, those have been his absolute favorite free reads. And he is my voracious reader. He is constantly reading. So there's other stuff that he likes too, but those definitely have been his favorite.
And I'm just gonna tell you a bug from the Creaturepedia called the toe nibbler. And it eats at your toes. And then a Wexter. It's a mini mushroom. And they attack you when you're outside at night.
Oh
and they have hoppy legs. And you can still eat them.
So that's another really good part about Wing Feather, is that some fantasy stuff, it's all like very serious and can be very gloomy. Even though there are serious and gloomy parts of Wing Feather, it is also very funny. It sprinkles humor all throughout it. And it might be hard to pick up on if you just start reading it without watching the TV show first. So maybe give it a try. It's on the Angel Studio app. And then you can kind of, I don't know, you can kind of understand like the feel of the show and get the feel of the book through it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, even though it deals with some heavier topics. It's a good one.
It's really long books. They get bigger and bigger.
Yes.
The fourth one is
Probably almost double that.
Yeah.
So not necessarily fast reads for everyone. If you have a voracious reader like this one right here, they will get through it quickly though. A lot of times he would come to me after just a few days and already have one of those books done because he just loved to keep reading it the whole time. So they're ones that you can definitely get really into. Anything else that you wanted to mention?
I do swimming.
All right, they're all telling you about their sports. He just made swim team, so that's what he's been doing. All right, so next up is just going to be my personal favorites that maybe they haven't mentioned yet. Even though I've liked a lot of the ones that they've talked about, I have my own personal favorites as well.
Wow.
I don't know where he gets the weirdness from.
Turtles.
All right, so it's really cool to have the kids with me. I'm not used to that, obviously. It's usually me sitting in front of the camera, or, you know, occasionally we'll do stuff with them, but it's been quite a long time. So that was kind of cool. But I have a few of my favorites here. So the first one is Parables from Nature. We already had this one. We kind of started it a little bit last year as like a family one that I would occasionally read to them. Ambleside breaks it down and does different parables for different years. I kind of switched that up a little bit so that I could have my older two kids on the same parable together. It just kind of made it easier, but then Arwen was doing one separately and Aspen hasn't started yet. So this one, the way that it's written, again, it's kind of like Tales from Shakespeare, where it's one that you kind of have to get used to. And it can feel like a lot, especially in the beginning when you're first trying to kind of like plow in there. But oh my goodness, each of these parables is so good. I have cried during almost every single one, honestly. Even if I wasn't reading this to my kids, I would probably want to read it just for me, just for the lessons that it reminds you of. They are truly in parable style, and all of them have a very deep connection to God. So if you're not a Christian, honestly, you might not love it if you're a secular family, but I definitely recommend it for those who are Christians. I mean, I recommend it even if you're not. It might change your mind about certain things or even just help you see things in a different light. But it's just, they're very, very beautiful, and I couldn't recommend it more. The second one that was one of my favorites, I think that we were finishing it up at the beginning of this year. We might have started it toward the end of last year. I'm not sure, but I haven't talked about it here yet on the channel. At least I don't think so. So I wanted to mention Little Britches. And honestly, I don't think that my kids knew this was an option to choose from, or they would have probably all mentioned it, because man, it wrecked us. We really loved this book. So it's a true story from Ralph Moody's childhood, growing up, him and his father kind of making this ranch together. I mean, of course, his mother and his siblings are there as well, but it really focuses on him and his dad the most. And by the end, you are feeling every single thing with these characters. There are maybe a couple rough parts here and there, maybe some cursing, things like that, if you're not comfortable with that. But the story is just really, really good. Again, it's one of those where you get to watch him grow. You get to watch him learn some of those life lessons that really impacted him. And you get to see his father and the way that he teaches them. And as a parent, that was very... I just felt like I could learn a lot from his father and the way that he approached situations. So again, this one, we all enjoyed it. Aspen even sat in a lot of times while we were reading it, and at the time he was only 4, and he liked listening to it some. You know, he was sometimes in and out, but even he listened to a good bit of it, and all the rest of the kids absolutely loved it. So I really, really recommend Little Britches. And last but not least, this one isn't necessarily one of my favorites, but Aspen forgot to do his shout out, so I thought that I would do it for him, which we have a couple of these dinosaur books from Ken Ham that we would use some mornings with his lessons. He really, really loved them. I don't have the other one with me right now. I think it's up in his room, actually. He still likes to look at it. And if you are a Christian who also likes science, I recommend things from Answers in Genesis, especially if you're interested in young earth creation, because there's not always a lot of stuff like that out there from a truly scientific perspective. So it's something to check out. I kind of hold all of that with a very loose hand because obviously I wasn't there in the beginning. So while I lean toward young earth creation, I also recognize that there's a possibility for things like the gap theory that would make room for old earth creation. But yeah, if you're interested in young earth stuff, I definitely recommend Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis. There were lots of other things that we liked too. A lot of the poetry and stuff that we did this year was just absolutely beautiful. There were definitely some poets that we liked more than others. But I didn't want to just kind of like overwhelm you and bombard you and include absolutely everything that we did. But that I felt like was a good overview of things that worked out really great, and maybe some things that need some tweaking, or maybe even some things that you just don't really want to do. Like, I don't know, Child's History of the World. I'm not really sure that we'll continue to keep that on the reading schedule. It just kind of adds another day or two to history work that I don't really feel is necessary for everything, but I don't know, we'll see. So if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. For more homeschooling videos, you can also always subscribe. We would love it if you stick around, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!